yeah, there's a lot of things there that I can touch on, because there's some of that is really, really important. So going back to what you started saying there, which was around around the solutions here. So the thing that I cannot I can't quite wrap my head around is you've got a huge amount of services spend and growing, and we're looking to outsource more, and we've got more opportunities to get access to niche skills that we really need in an environment where technology is everything, and we need to get access to specialists. You mentioned cybersecurity earlier on, but all the stuff that's being developed around Web 3.0 and how that's going to impact the way that we interact with technology. That is, I think, in the next 10 years, we're going to be blown away by how quickly that grows. But yeah, the question for me is then, there's a low-hanging fruit around performance management there, and I think there's got to be some hesitancy from organizations who maybe haven't seen traditional ERP solutions as this panacea that they thought it once was, and actually we're probably going to have to look at a multitude of different smaller options. SaaS solutions probably being the most logical, because really it scales, right? I mean, everything's based on even in an enterprise context, it's very easy to scale that from a small team and run pilot programs to roll that out all over the world if you're a global organization. But yeah, I think it is really, really surprising to me that there isn't not just from a technology standpoint, but also from a research standpoint. They just a lot of the thinking around supply chain management today is focused still on on the physical side. And that's why I think this is just such a huge opportunity. I think there's just that, as I say, I don't think these trends stop in 2022. We need to be prepared to be able to tackle these problems for the foreseeable future. But going to the second point, it's really interesting that we do a lot of the stuff during the sourcing process, pre-contract award. I think procurement tends to do quite well, but on the services side, we don't necessarily have the remit to tackle as much as we do on the physical goods side. So there's research from the mid-90s, Fearon and Bales, a couple of academics who looked at the S&P 500, and they basically found that America's largest firms spend about 60% of their third-party spend with service providers, but procurement managed less than a third of that under management. So you've got a huge gap in terms of where procurement may be able to add value by greater governance, implementing process, whatever it might be. But I think the challenge is kind of twofold. Historically, as you say, procurement's been at best maybe a gatekeeper in some of these categories, and at worst maybe a bottleneck. I don't want to be uncharitable, but I think in some cases we're kind of seen to slow things down where stakeholders want to get projects launched as quickly as possible. And I think we need to be much better at communicating procurement's value proposition. And what that means is we need to, I think firstly we need to realize that our first sale is within the organization rather than with the supply market. We need to act much more as sort of internal consultants than as a kind of transactional function that we're trying to force stakeholders to use. I don't think that's a winner. That might work in a commodity setting where we know we've got the best price. We can quite easily manage supply performance. We've got fantastic agreements that we can easily demonstrate value on. But that's much more difficult in a service context. And I think we need to realize that we need to be a trusted partner to the business rather than just saying we might have a fantastic agreement on paper, but service relationships are much more personal than that. We can't you can't mandate and force compliance in a service context. Another thing that you mentioned, which was really interesting, is post contract, and I think this is another thing, going back to sort of the watermelon effect. Post contract, there was a study that I've seen from Shelby Group, PwC have got similar data, that anywhere from sort of 16 to 20% of long-term outsourcing agreements leak value over the long term. So if you can imagine if you thought you were paying, £40,000 for a car, and you actually got to the dealership and they charge you 50, you would not be very happy. But the exact same thing is happening here in long-term outsourcing agreements, and being able to close that gap, I think, will go a long way to demonstrating procurement's value proposition as a long-term, delivering long-term value, not just in terms of savings that we can demonstrate on day one, but in terms of actually driving value into the P&L, which is, historically has been a bit of a challenge, is trying to translate what we see on in a savings report into what the CFO sees at the end of the year when they reconcile their accounts. So,
and I sometimes wonder, how much do the CFOs see? If they're looking back at supplier performance with the current information that most organisations have, are they even going to know that there have been those cost overruns? Or are they just going to know how much they've spent with particular suppliers? And that's just they're completely hamstrung without any of that information, because where there are these cost overruns, maybe there's very good reasons for it. But if it comes as a shock, there's going to be a negative feeling towards the supplier. So if, company looks at consultancy A and says, okay, over the last year, how much have we spent with them? How much did we contract originally? And how much did it end up being? Oh, they're underbidding and they're always over, it's always overrunning. But there might be very good reasons. The organization might have been ineffective internally in supporting what they were doing. If that information is captured post-contract in an iterative manner, where it's all being agreed as we go, we've agreed we're going to do this, it's going to cost that. Okay, this has changed. You guys have taken longer on that. There's a situation that's arisen. You've put this on the back burner for a while, resource constraints, whatever it might be. So actually now it's going to be slightly changed, but it's going to cost this. Everyone's happy. We agree it. We move on. Or actually the scope has expanded. We've now realized from the pilot phase, this new product conversation we're having is looking really exciting. So we want to double its scope. If all of those things are actually captured along the way, then theoretically everyone should be A, informed, and B, happy, as long as at every stage both parties are agreeing to what's being contracted and the delivery is happening in a manner that's consistent with that. But I just think people have just no visibility at all on that at the moment. There's so much ground to go. I think that these improvements can be just absolutely transformative for organizations.